Hello there. Welcome back to the First Stage Woodworking Podcast. My name is Paul Hyatt and I'll be your host. We talk about craftsmanship and finding meaning in our lives. I hope that you enjoy this podcast and that you will like, subscribe, and share it along with other people who might be interested in stuff like this. Thank you and God bless. All right, welcome back to the First Stage Woodworking Podcast. Today I am so excited and so incredibly honored to have a man that I love to death, that I met over a decade ago in one of the most unlikely places that you would figure that you're going to have a person have a huge impact on your life, which was the country of Afghanistan. We did not know one another before we actually got to the country, and just kind of the rough aspects of being in a war zone that was a pretty kinetic, combative environment really brought us together in such a way that can only be described as brotherhood. So this is my dear friend Josh Johnson. Josh, welcome to the podcast.
Paul, thanks for having me, man. That intro, I don't know, I don't think I deserve all that. Thank you. But dude, you said over a decade ago. That's crazy that it really has been
Yeah.
that long. Sometimes it feels like it was just yesterday, and and feel like it was just yesterday. Sometimes you always want to kind of go back and maybe not for all the bad, but for all the good that existed in that time. So yeah, thanks for having me, man.
Not a problem at all. It's my honor. But I would try to do some form of a biographical background of you, but I mean, you're kind of like me in that regard. That we've both kind of been all over the place. So
Yeah.
if anything you want to tell me about, like where you're born and raised, what your upbringing was like, and then kind of how that developed to where you are today, I'd love to know about it.
Sure, sure. So was born in this small inner city place called Petersburg in Virginia. I actually just live right up the road from it now. Spent most of my life in Virginia, but all up and down the East Coast a little bit, anywhere from Georgia to Pennsylvania, and then settled back in Virginia in the Richmond area right before actually 9/11. And a couple of days before 9/11, that was I was how old was I at the time? I guess I was 12. Um, my dad died, and then so I got pushed down to Colonial Heights High School, which is literally the bordering town right outside of Petersburg. And I graduated high school there, 2006. But childhood from 6 on down was pretty good. I mean, I couldn't really complain of what I had. Sometimes I didn't realize that I didn't have much. Looking back on it now, I realized. And so Petersburg, it's a small, really inner city place. There's a lot of impoverished people in Petersburg, and we kind of fit into that mold. But I didn't
Right.
know any better. Just living my life and enjoying life. You never really realize that you might have a little less than some other people if everybody around you doesn't have anything either. Um, but not to get on a soapbox and say, oh, I didn't have any money growing up, because it didn't matter. I felt like I lived a childhood that was a normal childhood. I didn't feel like we were struggling for anything because that's all I knew. So I enjoyed my childhood. There was a lot of violence there. Yeah, I did definitely, I was exposed to that at a young age. Saw my first person get shot when I was, who knows, somewhere like second or third grade, which is, I guess, a little unsavory. Um, but you you learn a lot of things in an early age in a place like that. But my dad did everything he could to make sure that although we were surrounded by um, you know guns and drugs, that we didn't have to become a product of our environment. Um, Down to making sure that we always spoke a certain way, or we always dressed a certain way, or always presented ourselves a certain way. And I'm very thankful for that nowadays. some people might look at it in a different light and maybe give it some different terms. But I feel like that upbringing has allowed me to be what I consider to be successful to now. But graduate high school 2006. Clinton Heights is another really small town. This area down here in Virginia is called the Tri Cities. You have Petersburg, Colonial Heights, Hopewell. There's more than three, but we always call it Tri Cities. It's kind of weird. Dinwiddie and everything else is just south of Richmond.
Hmm.
Um, and I graduated Colonial Heights 2006. Started working at this little rental company, which is so much fun. Is my first exposure to real men. Like since my dad wasn't around, I had go to my uncle's house every now and then and see the neighbor. But this is my first exposure to real men working a real hard job, and I heard every bad word under the sun and everything else that I could ever think of working with these guys. And I found myself wanting a little more of something that I didn't know what it was. A buddy of mine had just gone to a Marine boot camp. I didn't even know what a Marine was at the time. I had no clue. But he's a really good friend of mine, one of my best friends. And he wanted me to just go hang out with him at the recruiting station one day. And I said, sure, no big deal. Why not? Um, and I walk in and there's a Marine there. Remember his name? I don't remember a lot, but Gunnery Sergeant Kidd. Gunny, if you're listening, hello. I'm sure you're not a gunny now. But he asked me straight up if I wanted to shoot at people and blow stuff up. And, you know, 18-year-old me said, yeah. I had no reason to do this, but I also had no reason to not. So I left maybe 4 weeks after that encounter that I had with Gunny Kidd, the recruiting station down in Clinton Heights and here in Virginia. And set forth on a short career, honestly. It's of the Marines at least. I did 6 years. I had that deployment with you in 2010. And what an experience that was. It was something I'll always remember for sure.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it sounds like, um, with you and I both, like, we kind of have a similar background in the sense of like, you and I both, like, when I was a kid, I bounced around kind of like similar areas, but I moved around quite a bit. Um, and then my father was in the picture when I was a kid, but then left when I was 15 for a lot of different reasons. But that I don't really want to get into on here. Um, but uh, but it sounds like both of us really benefited from having, like, while my father wasn't uh, the most moral person on the planet and
Mm.
necessarily like walked the walk, I would say he definitely did want better for me, and had high expectations for me in my life, and did instill in me the idea that I could accomplish whatever I wanted to if I put my mind to it. Would you say that that was pretty similar with you and your father? And then after he passed away, you looked for that in other men as well?
Oh, for sure. I actually was having this conversation with might have been my little brother the other day, or another individual. I can't really remember who, but I definitely um saw that. My dad would always say, like, why would you go to school and get education? And I'm like, oh, I don't know. He's like, well, because you can, because we're here in this great place that allows us to get an education. So you're going to do it solely just because you can. You're always going to do something more and more and more because you can. There's no reason to shortchange yourself. Um, and I found myself also not shortchanging myself in a way that manifested itself in always wanting to make my leadership proud. So trying to go the extra mile for my leadership, whoever that may be, whatever capacity it was that I was working, um, especially if it was a male, because maybe I was missing that portion of my life that I didn't have that male validation growing up, um, and I didn't feel like I desired it, but subconsciously and looking back on things, I definitely was. And I think I still do now to this day. And, if I have a leader, I don't always try to do what I'm supposed to do because that's what I'm supposed to do. I want to do what I'm supposed to do because I want to make them proud. Um, so I definitely think that we mirror each other in that respect.
That's cool. Now, so we'll talk about uh, our deployment to Afghanistan here in just a second, but uh, I'd love for you to talk just where are you at today with everything. So what is your so like from 2010 to present day, and you don't have to
Sure.
walk me through because I know that you've got quite the background there, but you're a Virginia State police officer now. I think you.
Yeah.
So what led you to that?
Um, so I'll step back just a little bit. I left the Marines in 12 and joined the Army National. So I was in the Marine Reserves that whole time, and I joined the Army National Guard in 2013. I thought I was done with the military. Realized really quick that I needed to be in another uniform. Um, so all the while going to drills and had a deployment in between there as well. Um, I used to work at this security company, and at the time I wanted to go back to Petersburg to be a firefighter, and just doing all these things, and was doing great on the test and running around, and scoring high on the written test as well. And I had some military duty that I had to attend, and I asked, the fire department, and not to throw shade on them. This is just the way the process was. If I left for this military duty, if I could come back, I was in the same place I was in the hiring process. They said I know I had to start all over again. Um, and then just so happened that at the security company I worked for, I was a supervisor there. Under me was a retired Petersburg police officer, and he was like, "Hey, man, like I know you're from there. We talk about Petersburg all the time. I think that you might, enjoy doing this." And I never thought about being a lawman ever, um, but I was just somewhere where I mean, he was doing a similar job. I just assumed, maybe let me go check this thing out. If I don't like it, then I'll just leave and go do something else. Um, and I went and tried out for Petersburg PD, got into the academy, and once I hit the street, I absolutely loved it. It was I don't know what exactly it was about Petersburg outside of it's a high crime area with few officers. So you have to be essentially a Marine. You have to be a jack of all trades. Whatever your job is, it doesn't mean that that's just your job. You're doing 4 or 5 different things that aren't even in your purview. But being a law enforcement officer there allowed me to excel at a super high rate. Um, I've been in law enforcement since 2018, so 5 years, and most of my time has been in a specialty, and next to none of my time has been on patrol. I had 1 month of patrol there before I got pushed to a specialty, and now I'm with VSP. I'm on patrol, but really pushed me to VSP is I went on a deployment with the Army National Guard. I came home and had all aspirations of joining the FBI. After this deployment, I finished my degree while I was there in Africa. I was in Djibouti, and I was on a task force with Petersburg Police Department. It's hard to understand, so I'll say it a little slow, not to insult your intelligence at all. But with
I
Petersburg
take it
PD, I
personally.
was I was a narcotics detective with Petersburg Police, and I was deputized by the marshals and the FBI to work directly under the FBI, but Petersburg still paid my paycheck. So uh, went to the FBI office every day, worked with the special agents every day, worked federal cases every day. That is what I did. I thoroughly enjoyed it. I thought that's where I wanted to go. Um, and while I was gone in this deployment, everything was great. Finished my degree. I thought I was going towards that path, and that was where I was going to go. But family had to come first, and my wife and I didn't really think it was the best move to move the family at the time, since I'd been kind of separate from the family, although I was home. But the capacity that I worked was at a crazy pace where I was never really home. I'd be home to sleep, and but when a lot of times while they're gone, I'm home, and if I'm home, they're gone. So it was kind of it felt felt a little selfish to continue to just put myself first, opposed to the rest of the family and my wife's career as well.
Mhm.
So
And I completely understand that. All right. Sorry about that. We were having Zoom issues here to where we might have to do this in bits and pieces. But Josh, I think the last thing that I remember you talking about was um, you had particular career aspirations that would have taken you away from your family, but you essentially decided to make the sacrifice to um, uh, do still like a really really great job as being a law enforcement officer for the state of Virginia, um, but so that you could basically be around your kids. And I don't know if you want. Can I tell the world the good news
yeah, yeah, for
that
sure, for sure.
you're
Yeah,
you're getting ready to invite a third Johnson into the family, which is
that's
just
it.
a great blessing.
Thank you.
I was talking to you, but before this, that my wife and I are trying for our first, and have not had success yet. But we are hoping and praying that we're going to be able to start a family soon here, and hopefully we'll be right behind you there. So hopefully around the time that you're inviting your third child into the world, I'll be inviting my first into the world. So um,
I'm believing in it for you guys. I know you're going to be great parents, and it's well, what a journey it is. I can't wait for you to embark on it for sure.
so let me ask you though, and again, you don't have to, I mean, I'm not trying to put you on the spot here,
For
but
sure.
like as a man, you have those aspirations, I think, of wanting to do. And well, I think that that's like particularly for those of us like we both grew up. My family grew up in poverty, as you pointed out. You guys grew up not doing so hot. So like for me especially, like there is kind of that idea of having grown up in trailer parks and stuff like that,
Sure.
um, to being where I am today, which is a guy, uh, like a lot of like my father was not a very well. He didn't have a formal education. He didn't finish school or anything like that. So to be a man today that teaches
Mhm.
kids and is working on a book and does all of that, like a lot of the reason why I do that is because it's like, I'm like, well, you know we have such a limited amount of time, um that it's like you want to get out there and you want to accomplish great things, um even though the tide may be against you. So do you I guess my question is like, was that like a particularly hard sacrifice for you to make? Uh, or are you able to look at the bigger picture of it and say like, well, but this is worth it though, because I'm doing this for specifically for my family. Like what wisdom do you have to say from that?
Sure, sure. To to go back a little bit to answer that question. And to answer the question in short, yes, it was a big sacrifice, maybe in a blow to my ego more than anything else, and I'll explain why. Because so before I ever left the Marines, I had a wanting to go to Marine Special Operations, so MARSOC. That was after my second deployment with the Marines. I had an occasion with first actually had an occasion on my second deployment with the Bureau, which got me interested in that. And I was talking to those guys while I was there. They were like, "Hey man, like you go get your degree. We think you'll be a great fit." I said, "Screw that! I'm not getting a degree. I'd already tried school a couple of times. It wasn't anything I was interested in." But I got to meet another tier of troop, if you will, which really got me interested in Marine Special Operations. Come
Mm,
home, um, and try to embark on this journey, started training, think where I was wanted to be, and start talking to recruiters. And they wanted you to be a certain rank for a certain amount of time before you picked up a team leader position. And they really didn't want to bring that you in as a team leader, or at least in that rank. And right when I was cutting it really close, pack was pretty much done, and I start talking to recruiters some more and kind of putting the finishing touches on it. My wife was on board for it, and then she got pregnant with my first kid, my son, and it just didn't seem like it was the right time for me to leave then. So I said, okay, I know that the National Guard has special operations, so I'll go do that. and joined National Guard, and it, that dream had left, and I never just really went about it. Not saying that I could have done it. It was something I wanted to do, it just didn't line up. Um, and so knowing what I wanted to do before, I said, okay, now I got my degree. I want to do this job in the FBI, which is thinking once again special operations, HRT. I'm heavy into that kind of stuff. If you see like that, that's more of the things that I'm driven to. I like to be physical. I feel like God gave me a body that's fairly capable, and I like to use it. Not that I don't like to use my brain as well, but I think I'll be doing myself and those around me a great disjustice if I didn't use my God-given abilities, which are just my physicality, to for the betterment of man. I really do feel like that's what I'm put here for. Um, so HRT want to do it. Think about it for all this time. I was working right next to these guys. Had occasion to talk to them. It was a great time. Not working next to HRT. Don't get me wrong, but yeah, having passing guys. And then getting all the things I have to have done in order to make that realization for my life. And then God's like, hey man, I don't know if this is really meant for you at this time in your life, and is a major blow to my ego because I feel like I want these things. I feel like they are obtainable to me. I feel like I'm put in a position to be able to try my hardest, and I think I have a decent mindset in order to embark upon these ventures. But I've been deferred, if you will, and now that I know that Virginia State Police is where I am now, it's a large organization, clearly not just like I was working for Petersburg before. This is the entirety of the state, and they have similar things that are available. So that's a goal of mine in the future, that and becoming an investigator there as well. But to circle back and answer your question again, yeah, it was a hard decision for me to make for sure, because as much as I love my family, there's a thing about me that allows me to be, I don't want to say great at what I do because I don't think I'm great by any means, but sometimes better than some others, is sometimes my selfishness of not wanting to just settle, and not wanting to look a little less than I could. And maybe like I said, there's an ego there that I have, that I have to be better. I'm not afraid of competition. I enjoy competition. I'll make a competition out of flipping a quarter, or who can pick the biggest booger out of their nose, or whatever else. I will make a competition out of it if I can. And I am destined to compete, and I want to almost compete against myself as much as I can too. As you see, there's nothing. This is what I do in my garage when I'm
Yeah.
at my home. I'm either on that treadmill over there, or doing pull-ups over there, or lifting some weights that I have over here. Like that's all I do because I'm consistently competing against myself. Um, but to set myself up for the best possible position to do these things that I would like to do. So it's all that preparation is kind of like the fight. We train and train and train and train and train, and we want to fight. That's why we train. And then you don't get to do that. It's definitely a blow to the individual's ego to even see if they, okay, I want to see if I have what it takes, if I have the guts, if I'm strong enough, if I have the will. And that not having the chance to do some of these things can definitely knock you down. That's for sure.
Yeah, and I mean, I found myself in a similar position when I was, there's always that next highest level, right? I mean,
Hmm.
that you really, really kind of see yourself, that like you know that you could probably physically attain this thing. Um, but like in my own life, I when those things don't work out, like when it seems like a dream is comes like crashing down. Uh, so this is a 34-year-old Paul Hyatt talking to a 22-year-old Paul Hyatt, is that it's not the end of the world, that like that perhaps there's something even greater that you didn't necessarily perceive, because like in my own life, um you know uh I had aspirations at one point of like I was planning on going to the Marine Corps, um then getting out of the Marine Corps for a number of years to get my degree. then I plan on trying to go back into the Navy to be a Navy SEAL. Was kind of what I was what my aspiration was. But it just kind of became like when I married my wife, which is, you know, still to this day, with all the ups and downs of marriage, um, still what I consider to be what my true calling was in life, was to marry this woman, and to make all necessary sacrifices on the altar of our marriage that I possibly can, in order to be the best husband that I can be. And I have my shortcomings, like every man does in that particular regard. But I do love my wife, and I am very much a married man. And had I not done that, then I wouldn't have gotten to do, what was really the greatest thing that I've done with my life, which was become a teacher, which I really, really do believe that I was born to be. And a lot of people would look at that and say, like, well, but that's kind of an odd one to go from, like, aspirations. A lot of people, you become a Navy SEAL, then you can, like, write a book and, all
Yeah,
kinds of
and
stuff.
get the hair gel
But
deal.
nobody really necessarily cares about a Marine Corps infantryman. Uh, uh, but by limiting yourself, I've heard Jordan Peterson talk about this. By limiting yourself to a handful of things, um, and mastering those things, like at least one thing, then what actually happens to you is, like, the whole world of possibilities opens up to you, and then you become marketable in ways that
Sure.
you never perceived. So, like, I would have never thought in a million years that I would be able to do what I'm doing today as a teacher. Where, like, yeah, I mean, like, last week I teach a course called History Through Conspiracy Theories, which I got to teach at public school, which was cool. But now I get to teach, like, exactly what I want to teach with. So I was teaching
Yeah,
about the Nazis' connections to occult Satanism and stuff like that.
that's wow. It was very interesting.
And then last semester I got to teach Western political philosophy, and next school year I'll get to teach a 6-week course covering the United States elections, relating to politics. And
So do
I
you
get
get to
to,
pick the subjects that you want to teach for
yes,
those 6 weeks, or what is it 6, 8, or what, 9 weeks or
basically I just that's just a 6-week long course that's very specific. But then I also will have 12-week long government courses, and a year long Roman history course. So
a
I
year long?
yeah, it'll be
Wow.
12 weeks on the kind of the mythological Roman regal period, up
Sure.
to all of the Republic, and then the Roman Empire. So yeah,
Hmm.
it'll be a really, really, I get to teach specifically the things that I actually want to teach. So, like, with regard to my background, with what I studied, I was very heavy in school in politics and political philosophy in particular. Um, uh, Ancient history, especially Greek, Roman, and medieval history, and economics. So, like, if you look at kind of what I tend to bring to the table, and then independently, I've studied a lot of psychology and stuff along those lines.
Sure.
But none of that would have happened, if I wouldn't have. Um, and for me, like, the best things in my life, like the best moments in my life, where like, I feel like I have accomplished the real joy, uh or when I'm in front of students and I'm teaching something that I know to be absolutely true. uh
Hmm.
it you know makes the hair stand up on the back of your neck type of experience. And the only thing that kind of comes close to it is, when I make someone a piece of furniture and see the look in their eye, or the excitement when I give it to them, and that's a pretty cool experience too. But But I did want to shift gears, unless there was anything else you wanted to talk about with regard to your background.
No, no, no. It's kind of there's clearly a lot of layers and
Yeah,
nuance to it.
I mean, we could go on
Yeah,
for a long time.
yeah,
Like, and it's so weird, when you kind of take the path that guys like us have taken, it's like it's almost like it's hard for people to follow along with like, wait, how did you get over here? So,
it
so
is.
yeah,
It really is. Yeah,
yeah. But I did want to talk about just because it had such an impact on me, was the experiences that we had together when we were deployed to Afghanistan.
yes.
So I guess it'd be fun. We met. I still remember well the first time that I met you.
I don't. So brief me.
So I remember, and you'll remember it, I'm sure when I start talking about it. But uh, we were up at Bougie, okay, and we'd kind of earn it. Well, no, we weren't. We were still um uh at Leatherneck. We hadn't even actually like pushed out yet
Okay.
to where our area of operations was going to be, because there was also one other thing that I wanted to mention that makes Josh a particularly honorable person, was that your deployment was completely volunteer based, right?
It was, yes.
So, like, what was that like in the sense of, before I go into the story of when I met you, like,
Sure.
the way I remember you telling it to me was like all of the guys, so like you, Byram, bunch of other dudes, you guys, you were like given the opportunity of like, hey, this group of lunatic Marines from out in 29 Palms are going on this troop surge to Afghanistan. We need X amount of volunteers. Who wants to go? And you chose to go. Why was it that you chose to go, and what was that all about?
Yeah, sure. I think it was so the leadership that we had at the time, I thought was absolutely fantastic. And watching them work and being under their tutelage made you want to work for them in the capacity that you were called to work in.
Mhm.
I don't think very many people, maybe outside of myself, kind of join on a whim, like I explained before, but not very many people join just to hang around and do whatever. Um, so once you knew what was at stake and you knew what the job actually was, um, those that were bought in were fully bought in, and it was the 36 that they needed. So I couldn't tell you. It's probably three-fourths of the company that raised their hand and wanted to go. So I can't just say that it was just me. Like I raised my hand, woo, I want to go. But
Right.
there was, I mean, it was everybody really wanted to go.
Yeah.
Um, so for I was a boot. For those that don't know, a boot is just a new Marine. So yeah, all the boots they
It's a
were going
very
to go.
affectionate term for someone who is way in over their head.
Yeah, no kidding, right? No, no kidding. Um, uh, so they took I don't want to say I was one of the better boots. I would never try to discredit anyone else like that. But I think there was a thought into some of the the better young Marines as to who should we take to kind of stack this deck in our favor, if you will. So we took the cream of the crop leadership and took some pretty good team leaders and all the good young lance corporals that we could. And then we sent off. Yeah, it was there was no there was no if you don't go, you're going to be in trouble or anything like that. It's who wants to go, and I was kind of rogered up after that. Really,
Awesome.
yeah,
Well, I remember meeting you at Leatherneck because that was when we basically found out who our combat engineers were going to be. So before
sure.
we got to Afghanistan, like you guys were basically like just like you guys were training with us, but I had never ran into you even once. Like I think that you guys were like attached to like weapons company or H&S company or something like that.
We never really integrated all the work that we did throughout the work up there in 29 Palms. Um, was more like we just stayed really organic. Went off and through a couple Bangalore's on something, so for a deception
Yeah.
charge, for you guys to do an assault and a couple of line charges here or there, and then we did a lot of very IED detection specific stuff that which I'm very glad that we did. Not that melding of the line companies or the infantry, the standard infantry Marines, if you will, was not important, but that could be done on scene, and as it was.
Right.
But understanding more of the task at hand, the IED laden environment that we're going into, understanding the nuance there, and being able to combat those was of the utmost importance. So we spent a lot of time just our platoon, because it really was, it's all that we sent, the platoon for the entire battalion. We spent a lot of time with just us.
Yeah. But um, basically, there was just one day before we pushed out to our area of operations, which was going to be the Bougie Boss Pass up in, well, in the Farah province of Afghanistan. If anybody has a map and wants to find these random places out in the middle of nowhere, uh, but my background was as I was a fire team leader, and and when I deployed to Iraq, I was also doing intelligence work. And because of that, I had a background in tactical site exploitation. So I knew how to search for bombs and bomb making material and all kinds of stuff. So I had a background with it. But I didn't, like I knew that I was in first squad, and I knew who my team was, and I knew that I was the assault team in the assault squad for Second Platoon and India Company, Third Battalion, 7th Marine Regiment. But outside of that, like we didn't really know what we were going to be doing over there, and kind of until we got there, or at least we weren't told what we were going to be doing anyway. And then it was, we knew that the IED threat was going to be there,
Sure.
and I knew that I was probably going to be walking the front of a patrol. But there wasn't really anybody else in the squad that necessarily had the background that I had. And that was when we found out that it was like, oh, we're going to have attachments to our squad, which were a group of combat engineers. So I remember going to wherever you guys were staying at Leatherneck, and that was when like my squad leader was like, all right, you're going to go over here, and we're going to do some training with the combat engineers. And I was like, okay. And that was when I met you and some of the other engineers that were there. I remember shaking your hand. Oh no, did you freeze up again?
No, no,
Okay,
I'm
okay.
smiling and
Just
looking
make
at you because
sure.
I
So,
remember this. You ran the
okay,
IED
yeah.
lanes. I remember that. Yeah.
So I remember being introduced to you, and they were like, "All right, this guy's going to be attached to your squad, and he's going to be walking the other side of a tactical column with you for the foreseeable future." And I remember shaking your hand, and we trained together, and kind of the rest is history.
Yep.
Um, but like because of that, like so, I mean, like that, which I think just speaks to like how like awesome the Marine Corps is, really, in the sense that like you and I didn't know each other at all before
No.
that point. Like we had no idea who one another were, but now we are literally like a lot of people are depending on us, and and our squad, like we did get thrown into some very hairy situations. Like I remember Kilo Company was like the first company that tried to make it across the Moose Calais Wadi when we went to the village of Doab,
Yeah.
and I remember like 2 weeks before you and I went across that wadi to go to where we wound up getting stranded for like close to a month. Um, you you and I like the Kilo Company lost 13 vehicles,
Yep.
and so I mean like like and you and I had to clear for IEDs across this
Yeah.
wadi, that was constantly being mortared. There were bombs everywhere, and we did have like a mine roller get blown up 2 times while we
Yeah,
were going across it. I mean, like, you and I saw some incredibly stressful situations, and lived in fighting holes with one another. I remember praying with you. I remember you doing a daily devotional over there.
I still have that.
I mean, like, so it was just this incredible relationship to where it was like, I was just like, what a like that was an incredibly scary time for me to be in, and to have this guy who was just right there, that I saw eye to eye with on most things, and we could talk about anything with one another, including like our fears, and anything that was bothering about us, things that were going on back home. Like, so I mean, like, in 7 months, I made a brotherhood with a guy that, it's just like, I think about you constantly, and my
No, of
wife,
course, yeah,
my wife has never met you, and she'll be like, how are things with Josh? It's like she knows you,
yeah,
like, just as well, because she was, kind of there for it all too, and
sure.
she knew about you, and I talked about you all the time. Um, so I mean, I greatly looked up to you, and literally, here today, uh, because of that relationship that we had. Like, I definitely, like, there were times when it was scary, and
To say the least.
you were right there for those really scary moments, and I got a particular story to tell there, but I did want to ask. Uh, what was your perception of me when we met, and then for the rest of the deployment? Like, what was that like for you?
I'm glad you jogged my memory about the meeting at the IAD lanes because I do definitely remember that now. And my one of my biggest things that, especially with the job I was charged with, which essentially was just making sure that nobody stepped on the landmine. So if somebody stepped on it, it had to be me. Nobody behind me could step on it. And you want to sound as knowledgeable and as confident about your job, especially when that's your job, as possible. So my main thing is don't look like an idiot, right? Like I met you and I shook your hand, and sure, like I really do remember that now. But in my mind, I'm like, okay, I need to make sure that this guy believes what I'm saying and knows that I can do this job, so they don't think I'm an idiot. Much less if I am an idiot. Somebody blows up behind me. I didn't want to be embarrassed. But um, as time went on and we actually were getting into things and going about, I remember before it ever really got kinetic, there was a lot of driving around, just in the Bougie Boss Pass, just all the time, here, there, and get out and sweep a little bit. And I just remember us having the deepest of conversations about, sometimes it was about nothing, and sometimes it was about everything. Um, and having someone to talk to where I didn't feel like I had to hinder myself. I feel like I could be in a the manliest of sense. I could be vulnerable to you, so I didn't have to carry a load by myself. Like clearly, I consider myself a Christian, and I clearly want to give all my cares, to God. But sometimes the reality is I'm thinking about the here and now, and being able to share things with you in the here and now, or the then and there, if you will, that I was able to continue with my job. I really was. Sometimes I felt like I would be so scared of certain things that I would almost be paralyzed. But through my interactions with you, I was able to, okay, well, it's not as bad as it was yesterday. At least
Right.
nobody got shot today. So I guess we're on the up and up now. Um, but I really do equate my mortality here, and how I really view a lot of my life due to, like you said, those 7 months in Afghanistan with a complete and total stranger that has now become one of the best friends I could ever have. No matter how often we speak or how often I see you, which only has been since I haven't seen you since then, outside of Zoom. But
And we need to fix that. Like I really do
no,
want to
no, for
make it
sure.
out to you. So I
Yeah, yeah,
we definitely need to rectify that in both of our lives, but we'll get it figured out. But
yeah, yeah. That's soon to come. I definitely believe that. But I mean, I can't. There aren't really words to describe the bonds that you create with someone when your life is the currency that you dabble in. You know, it's a lot different than working at IBM and maybe a computer chip's messed up, or
right, the stakes
or
are as high as they get.
it doesn't get any higher. And then really, not to discredit anyone else's position either, but if someone was going to get blown up or someone was going to get shot, it was going to be you or I. 'Cause we were always at the front. We're always cracking the door, always, first out the truck, or
Yeah.
I remember a lot of times, Sergeant B or Staff Sergeant Hassel just saying, "Hey, we're going to go in this direction." And if we were in an elevated
Yep.
position, I would look and say, "Okay," like maybe you could see, kind of weasel your way through a couple, different compounds or so. But really, I just remember saying, "We're going in this direction." And I didn't really even need the GRG. I would just, all right, this is the
Yep.
cardinal. I got my compass. That's where we're going. Um, but to have people trust you in that manner, hey, you're walking in front and we can't die. So you better find what there is to find. And if you don't, somebody's going to die.
Yep.
And outside of me doing that to myself, I guess we did pretty good.
Yeah. Yeah, which brings me. I want to get to that in a little bit,
Sure.
but I was on a podcast recently with the Catholic gentleman. I don't know if you got a chance to listen to that or not, but I described the nature of like deploying to a combat zone and knowing um, that there's a very real possibility of death
Hmm.
that makes you reflect on um, on the bigger questions of life, and that's really kind of where I feel like we were. Um, and it's like that's the thing that it had a really profound impact on me. That when you look at our world today, not being politically naive, it's probably the most uncontroversial thing that I would ever say is that America is clearly divided in many ways.
Sure.
But like being in the simplicity of life versus death and having to deal with and overcome the problems associated with that. Um, I think that like, it removed any and all differences between you and I and everyone else that was there. It's just like, we literally don't have time to complain and focus on small things,
Yeah.
like sweating the small stuff. Like we have to focus on surviving the day. Like that's
Yes.
making sure that we don't get killed in the night.
Yes.
It really was that real of a situation, and you know, and uh, for me, that became very real. Um, the day that I thought that you died. Like
Yeah.
that was really like so I'll tell that story real quick. I was right at the end of our deployment, which has its own kind of psychological impact on you. That it's like you're I'm almost there. It's like
Yeah.
you like the finish line, but
Yeah.
it still feels like it's a million miles away. So it's like
For sure.
you're 2 weeks away from being home. Um, but we kept getting more and more dangerous missions. Like like we like had to do a major clearing operation in the last month that we were in Afghanistan,
Yeah.
and we went into an area that no one had been into for a long time, and it was literally you and I that had to jump the wall of a compound because you don't go through doors, and
Yeah,
and
no, you don't.
that's a really good way to die.
Yeah,
And so we take a ladder and we go over a wall, and I was providing security for you while you were searching for an IED, and you stepped on an IED, and I remember you just going up into a giant plume of smoke and dust, and I literally thought that my one of my best friends is dead. So
yeah,
I went I jumped off of the top of the building that I was providing security on and started running towards you because I didn't know what else to do. Uh, and here you come running out of the debris and everything, and I'm like, you know, like, what is this? I could tell that you couldn't see, so I started yelling for you, and you ran to my voice and grabbed you and got you up on top of the roof, and we got you out of there. Um, so yeah, you know, in that you know short few moment, like that whole thing, which was like one of the biggest moments of my life because it, like I really thought it was like each step toward you in that moment was like my feet were full of lead basically because I was like, I'm gonna run up on my friend missing a leg, dead.
sure.
I don't know what, like I just you were in a cloud of smoke and dust and whatnot. Um and which I don't even know if you know about this or not, but and I've attributed this to being literally a miracle, which was that that IED that you stepped on, it was actually a 40-pound IED that only like a couple pounds of it went off, so
Yeah,
it was inert. But it was actually daisy chained to I think 7 other IEDs, and that was just on that one side of the compound.
yeah.
Because then another Marine, Matt Thompson,
Tho-
uh,
Thompson, yeah,
he found those other 7, and then he went to the other side of the compound and found several more IEDs, and then he went out the front door of that compound and found like there was it was either close to or right around 1,000 pounds of homemade explosives that were in that one compound. So like if you would have set off, just so that people can understand what these bombs do, 140-pound IED will take the front end off of an up armored vehicle. So it is enough explosive to vaporize a human body, basically. 10-pound explosive was enough to take off limbs. Um, so, like to have 7 of those IEDs all wired together in this compound in Sangin, Afghanistan in 2010, it was enough explosive to definitely kill Josh. Probably would have killed me, and probably would have killed a number of Marines on the other side of the wall
for sure.
that were waiting on us to clear the inside of this compound. And uh, so like it really was, in my mind, a miracle for you to have survived uh, that bomb. And the reason why you missed it, just so people can understand that too, um, an IED for it to go inert like that means that it was there for a long time. So that means that it's basically been washed out to where it's very hard to be able to find something like that. And if they're buried somewhat deep, which that's probably what happened with this one, it's not the easiest thing to be able to find. So it was an honest mistake that anyone could have made. In fact, earlier in that mission, I had missed one,
Sure. Yeah,
but it was inert, and someone else found it, and that was also one of it's like the emotional highs and lows that you go through on a deployment like that are just absolutely insane. So, I had at that point toward the end of the deployment, I had had friends die, I had seen men die, and that to me was like it was like one of the I was like so thankful to God that you did not die, because I was like, I don't know what I would have done with my life going forward, um, if you would have passed away, because that's like how much you meant to me, and how much you still mean to me today. Um, so, but I understand from it though that I remember you took a bunch of dust to the eyes, so you couldn't. That was why you couldn't really see. And then I remember you saying that like one side of your body was like really numb from the blast and everything.
Yeah, I was like perforated my left eardrum, had some corneal abrasions and a little bit of frag to the eyes, and little specks of other stuff. And yeah, but I was my third time getting rocked, so it kind of some other I don't know all the other brain stuff and whatever, but uh that's for the doctor to tell me down the road because I'm afraid to know what the actual prognosis is. But yeah,
But
yeah, like my left side kind of went pretty numb for a little while. Yeah,
yeah, but I was so thankful that you were alive, because I was just like it would have just completely and totally destroyed me, to have had you die, especially that close to the end of the deployment, because we
sure.
did lose a Marine pretty close to the end of the deployment, and that had a big impact on everybody.
Yeah,
I mean, it was hard on everybody to lose Febreze. So,
yeah, yeah, that was rough.
I'm thankful to God that you made it out of there alive, and I'm incredibly thankful for you having been in my life. But what was that experience like for you? You know, I talked quite a bit about, you know, being on that deployment and having men like you in my life has shaped really my outlook on life. You know, like I went to university and I would have people complain about things, and I would just be like, what, like, you don't know, like, people don't realize how bad women have it
Oh wow.
countries outside the United States.
Wow.
Um,
Yes.
People don't realize that like our country, you know, puts a huge emphasis on the protection of human life and the
Mm.
sanctity of human life that isn't that way around the world. And
No.
so I'm just kind of curious, like what impact did that have on you, like personally, having a very close call with death? I mean, like a very like that. I'm sure that made you reflect on that as you were leaving that area of like what, how close you came to biting the bullet. What
Sure, sure.
impact did that have on you? What impact did the deployment as a whole have on you?
I know that the start of that day, I remember I was reading my Bible before we stepped off. I remember we were at I think it was patrol base like Amu or something like that. It was A&A
Almost.
patrol base. Oh, we left Almas and then we went to this other
Oh no,
A&A.
you're right. It was Nole.
Okay, okay. Um, and I remember reading my Bible and then another Marine to be unnamed because he's a cool guy. I don't want to make it seem like he was weird, but he's like, dude, put that thing away. Nobody's dying. Like you're making me feel weird. I was like, I'm gonna read this thing, man. I'm reading. All right. But to continue that day, going on and on. I remember right before that happened, I remember you and I were doing something and we're walking down this alleyway. We're just getting absolutely hammered by some automatic fire, and I'm sweeping down this alleyway, and then just rounds zip right in front of us. I'm like, okay, well, we got to figure out something to go around this whichever way. And I remember I don't know who told us like, hey, we need to get snipers up on this roof over here, and that's as to why we climbed over the wall and to go to that area of the compound. And it was something that I had never done before. I would never take the path of least resistance. I remember walking us through some of the nastiest stuff that Afghan had as to why everybody has their legs. But that day we were rushed, and I walked us right towards some stairs and the path of least resistance, and those stairs were going to be able to me allow me to get those snipers on the roof fast. And boom, right? So I blow up. Um, and I'll go to funny, then I'll go to serious. I remember after Steph Sergeant Hassel came across the wall, like I don't know if you poured water on me or whomever, but my pants were soaked, And I was like, I'm sorry, I peed my pants.
I do remember that,
And
yeah.
he's like, no, man, we poured water on you. It's okay. I was like, no, I
Yeah.
peed my pants.
I can't remember why they poured the water on you, but yeah, I do remember that, and I do remember you because you couldn't see anything. You could just feel
No,
the wet down there, and you were like, "I did I pee my pants?" Yeah, I remember that.
no.
Yep.
um, but so I remember I'm getting carted off to a vehicle, MRAP, MATV. I can't remember exactly what it was. And there was a lieutenant that passed me, and he asked me what happened, and I'm sure I was blah 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 blah. And then somebody, for me, told me, explained to him what happened, and I saw him later on. Um, and he said to me, he's like, "Man, you must be one of the luckiest people I've ever met." I told him, I said, "I don't believe in luck. I believe in God," and I've said that for the longest. Um, I can't. I've said that forever. I don't really believe in luck. I only believe in God. I don't believe in happenstance. I believe in God.
I remember you saying
Um,
that to me all the time over there because even
yeah,
I would I'd be like, "Man, we got lucky," and he's just like, "It ain't luck, it's God, man."
yeah, yeah. Um, but after having that experience and living through that, it was great for me. It was bad for me at the same time because that showed me, like, man, like I can do whatever and I'm fine. You can't take me out. And coming home after that, and being separate from all the people you're out there with, and sharing those experiences with. Um, I never got down myself to the point where over some service members have thoughts of suicide or anything like that. But I definitely did some things. I mean, I indulged in alcohol to no extent, um, and I thought that I'd be able to feel the high that was, and that specific moment was, um, with alcohol and going after women, and that never was the answer, right? It didn't even get close to filling that. Yeah, yeah. It wasn't until I stopped really trying to rely on filling my time with alcohol and trying to go after women, and I actually focused more on God and being sober, that I actually fully dealt with what was going on, or what had happened. But it changed my life in ways that I couldn't even imagine. I don't want to discredit anyone's difficulties or things they've been through in life, but until you've been tested like that, it's hard to really know what you're capable of. And I've found what I think I am capable of, and maybe I haven't found it. Maybe I haven't even gotten close to finding the ceiling, but I've gotten close to maybe where it is. But I'm more thankful for that event, and I would have it happen to me 1,000 times over than to never live that through that at all. Mm.
Yeah, and this kind of um, brings me to the kind of the final thing that I wanted to talk with you about for this particular podcast was that um, uh, and I'm not meaning this to sound in any way prideful, uh,
Sure.
but like what I've found is since I've come back um, from over there, is that you're very different
Mm.
after a situation like that, and people do um, see you as being different. The way that I like to relate it, I don't know if you're a fan of the Lord of the Rings, but great books. But the character Bilbo Baggins, for example, he goes off on this adventure, and um, it tests him in all of these crazy ways, and he winds up fighting in a war, and there's a dragon that's slayed, and all this crazy stuff. And then he comes back to the Shire, and he's treated differently for the rest of his life. It's and the way that I've heard Jordan Peterson talk about it, who I greatly admire. He says that when you kind of go through, when you're kind of baptized by fire in that way, you become tainted by malevolence, and
Mm,
everybody kind of like, and that's not a bad thing. Um, but it's like, fully, uh, what really the human being is capable of. Like
sure.
I've experienced, well, we have experienced suicide bombers, and people that will lay in wait and try to kill you, with like a sniper rifle and stuff like that. Um, so um, you know, like there's not very many men that kind of go through what was traditionally seen as a rite of passage,
Sure.
um, for their life anymore. And I have told people about this book endlessly, but there's a book called, King, Warrior, Magician, Lover, that really opened my eyes um, uh, to that in society. That it's like, you know, we did some dangerous stuff when we were kids, basically, because really, when you're, 18 to 22 years old,
Yeah.
um, you don't know anything, but like going on that adventure and taking that step, and dancing with death in many ways. Um, I see that as one of the, like, I think that it has such a profound impact on you for the rest of your life, um, because it's when you fully embrace manhood. It is
Sure.
by finding out that it's like by escaping, or by having the courage to face death, in a way you do kind of feel like you can maybe not overcome it, but you've come to terms with it. Like you've come
Sure.
to terms with your own mortality, and it makes you live your life in such a way, which probably explains why you do have that aspect of, like, knowing that you're capable of more, like wanting to be, something greater, because
Sure.
you very nearly had that gift of life robbed away from you prematurely. So there's that aspect of like wanting to get out, and that is, like the with regard to my life, it's, from being blown up by IEDs, pinned down by snipers, having close calls with suicide bombers, like all of this stuff. It really does make you want to get out in the world, and and achieve, to take, to I guess, live life to the fullest, and
Sure.
do things, um, uh, because they are challenging, and I think that that's, um, uh, I think that that's in great need today in our society. Like young men, I think, need to hear that. And I was on a podcast recently talking about that, and like I could tell it was like a really compelling thing for people to hear, that I attribute that to a rite of passage, and it's got people kind of thinking about that. So, is there anything you would add to that or take away from that, or what do you think?
Sure. I definitely feel like the testing of one's mortality was, and I guess I don't want to say that I'm hoping that it still should be here in America, because that would change everything that America is, and I don't know if I'd want that for my wife and kids continually. But I think young men are so afraid to venture out nowadays and be venture out and be adventurous, uh, that we're not fulfilling what it is to be a man anymore. Um, there's something innate in every little boy. You pick up a little boy, he wants to punch you in your face. He wants to scratch at you. It's natural from birth. We are aggressive, and that's who we're meant to be. There's a difference between being aggressive and being violent, and then even there's a difference between being violent and being, a homicidal maniac.
Right.
Aggression and violence are not bad things. I welcome them with open arms, because aggression and violence is what keeps this thing the greatest country that the world has ever known. running the way it's supposed to run. It's what has, what God has used to, knock down the walls of Jericho, to slay, the giant Philistine, to do all these other different great things. But aggression and violence is absolutely necessary in this world. And if we are absent that, um, the rite of passage, I think that you're speaking of, dies. Thus, men become something to where we're confused whether we are to wear our dress or not, or we're confused whether I need to explain to you that I would prefer to be called they them opposed to just Josh Johnson, or all these other different things that are really old nowadays. We're more focused on the nonsense nuance than what it is to just survive. And that's what, the test is, just surviving. When you have nothing else to do but just survive, like you said earlier, we don't have time to worry about these nonsensical things. The the fight for your life, and is it's very hard to explain in ways that, not to insult the intelligence of the audience either, but I would like to break it down in ways that for more of the layman opposed to just that of the warrior, because not everyone is built to go to Afghanistan with an M16 and go fight, day in and day out. And I understand that it doesn't mean that you're any less of a man for that matter either. Um,
No, I mean, like my contention would basically be that, at least on my life,
sure,
like after I got out of the Marine Corps, my wife and I started competing in powerlifting. Like you need something that's going to test you and
yes,
discipline you in both body and mind.
mm,
So it's um uh like and I like I think that like one of the biggest issues, like I developed being a woodworker, and doing it with hand tools specifically because I was like, oh well, that's harder. Like
sure,
it's
sure,
it's not as easy to do it, with hand tools than what it is with machines. And now I have a lot of machines, and it's like, yeah, it's way easier to do it this way. Um, but there's something about doing something for the sake of it being hard that's going to call out the best in you, and I think that it ultimately like makes you unite with um the greatest possible good, and it makes it to where, like, if you don't have that, like if you live a life of endless comfort and
mm,
pleasure and stuff like that, well, then what that means is that, well, when you get to that age where your endless comfort and pleasure start to come to an end, then now you're gripping onto something that isn't truly yours. Like you're
sure,
you're gripping onto the life that God gave you. You're gripping onto your youth that that you no longer possess. So that's, I think, where you wind up with older men chasing after younger women,
mm,
leaving their wives for someone else, making terrible, nonsensical mistakes, um, because they have always just had what they wanted here and now they're not getting that, so they begin to take things that aren't actually theirs. But it's
sure,
like, but if you um, continue to walk the path of discipline and virtue and go after wisdom rather than just trying to be the smartest person in the room, you go after uh, like you talked about a competition with yourself. Like you go after the daily max. Like trying to be able to do better today than you did the day before, and realizing that your time is limited. So you have this great tradition that's been handed down to you by the greatness of men from the past that you're hoping to add to rather than take away from.
sure.
And I think that all of that is realized when you actually go out and do things that are hard that can in fact kill you. So,
Sure, sure.
uh,
No, yeah, I have something that I say in my head. Sometimes I say it out loud, and I train it here in my garage a lot, by myself, so I can scream as loud as I want. But um, I started saying this when I was at Wounded Warrior after that event, in Afghanistan. It was back in Leatherneck. I started saying to myself, they died, you lived. They died, you lived, and I would get angry, and I was scared during that time. 'Cause you guys were still out there hooking and jabbing, and here I am, like they gave us these weird sweatsuit kind of things that we had to, that was like to signify when you would go to the chow hall, like if these guys are presenting a certain way, like they're hurt, that's why they're here
yeah,
in this capacity. So we just drive around in MRAP all day long, and we go to the chow hall, we go hang out with other people, other countries, and play volleyball, or go to the gym. But yeah, they take your gun away in a place where you only want a gun. I'm with a whole bunch of people I don't know. So I felt like I was alone.
yeah,
So I started, that's when I actually really started training. And I would never say that I'm God's gift to fitness by any means. I try, but I started telling myself, they died, you live, they died, you live. Think about all the guys that we had lost, um, previously to me before my injury. And I was saying that because I wanted to make sure that their sacrifice did not go to waste by my efforts. So if I'm going to do something, why not do it 150% opposed to just go do this easy thing? And that's led me to it. I don't climb as often as I like to, but I've gotten a lot heavier into rock climbing. I've been kind of rock climbing for the last, oh, my 34, like 20 years, honestly. Got me into like you said, I thought it was a great analogy. You said you like to woodwork more with your hands than you do with all the other tools because it's harder. I started shooting a bow, and I don't shoot with the sight. I'll get a sight later on, but I don't shoot with the sight because it's hard. I want to learn the hard way, and then I can apply that to the easy way. It's like
yeah,
shooting a gun. You shoot iron sights. That's great. You do great, but you throw optic on it, you can see everything. You can hit it easy. So, like right now in the Army National Guard, I'm the sniper section leader for my battalion, and I tell people all the time, like, oh, how do you do that? And the guys that aren't exactly versed in precision, I was like, well, it's not as hard as you think if you can see everything that you're shooting at. But if you have
right,
iron sights on it, it's a lot harder. But doing the hard thing, um, I think like you're saying, it's doing it because it's hard. The pursuit in itself should mean something, not just the outcome.
right,
Um, the pursuit, the hard journey, like you said, you seek wisdom on that hard journey. You're learning all these lessons throughout your time, slugging away whatever that journey may be. Like you said, maybe it's powerlifting, or even being an author. But the joy that's on the other side of the hard thing is what really, I think, really matters for sure. But the journey makes that joy.
yeah, yeah, there's a psychologist by the name of Carl Jung that he's got kind of a famous Latin saying that's going around all over the place called "In sterquilinus invenitur," which means
Mm,
"In filth it will be found," or
sure.
basically what it would translate to is what you most want to find will be found where you least want to find it,
Mm,
and that's and I or in Christianity it would just be referred to as the dark night of the soul.
sure.
Like when you at that lowest point, right? Like that's a test from God in order to see what you're really made of. But then like if you can make it through that test forthrightly, then you now have an appreciation for life that like that another person who failed to overcome or to stand up to that test forthrightly. They're just going to live a lesser life because
Sure.
they shied away from their true calling.
Yes, I
When
agree.
times got tough, they threw in the towel and said, "Well, I'll choose the easy thing rather than to continue to do what is required of me by God.
Sure.
But certainly, like with our individual experience with regard to war, like seeing men lay down their lives, it makes it so much more real that it's like when you get home from that, it's like, yeah, I'm going to live my life in such a way that would make those people joyful for me, because it's
Oh,
like,
sure.
and I do like to think that the Marines that didn't make it home when we were there, that they are in a better place, and they are looking down at all of us, and they are saying like, you know, good for you, Josh. Like good
Yeah.
for you that you have a wife and are getting ready to welcome another child in the world, and that you're able to use your strength to protect those who are not strong enough to defend themselves, and by your wisdom and your virtue to make the right decisions in impossible situations that you're going to run into as a police officer. So I mean, you know, man, I knew we were gonna have a great conversation.
Yeah.
I've loved this so much, and I wish we could talk forever, but I know that you're probably late for supper, and I don't want to upset your wife. But is there anything else you want to end with, or just any words of wisdom that you want to part ways with, or anything like that?
Um, I try uh, every time I come in contact with somebody that generally an offender, right? Maybe these people are I've dealt with many a different investigation, many different type of offender, and generally when I know somebody's probably going to go down for some time, um, especially if they're young, and it seemed like it was just a spur of the moment decision that they made. I try to always impart on them to not let this one moment define the rest of their life.
Yep.
Generally, yes, part of it is it's going to define the rest of their life because I'm talking about generally felonious action. So you get an F on your background, it changes everything for you. But more of the mind that I don't want them to allow to define the rest of their life. Um, I could have allowed, you know, a small little incident like I call it small because in the grand scheme of things, it was small. It was the whole incident was, a, a blink of an eye. It was fast, right? I could have let that define my life for the worst, or or any other myriad of incident that we had. But not allowing something that seems that it's there to knock you down be the last word, because there's so much more to life than you waking up, making this mistake, and allowing you to just lie in the bed with this mistake for the rest of your life. There's always a silver lining, in more of a faith-based way. Like God always has an open door.
Yep.
You have to also be willing to accept that it's going to be a hard road, like we were just speaking about, maybe to get to that door and open it. But that doesn't mean that that hard road is not the road to take. That is the road to take. Um, Never just settle for less. Always be more. You're worth more. You are more. He made us for more. I think we tend to just barely live up to our potential in this life. And when we turn in these bodies of ours, like you want to turn it in with tires flat, transmission blown, the coolant leaking out. Try your hardest in everything you do. And honestly,
Yeah.
I think there's something like we were speaking of before, but that's where the true joy is, and enjoying the process of something. The outcome will be there, but enjoying the process and being willing to go through things that are difficult, really, you can write your own ticket after that.
All right, man. Well, hey, buddy, I appreciate everything that you were able to talk with me about.
Of course,
We'll have
Paul.
to have you back onto the podcast eventually. And I got to get out to see you and see the wife
Yeah,
and kids and all that good stuff. My wife she's like, you got to get out there, man. I'm like, I know. It's just, we've got so much going on. I know you have so much going on
yeah.
too. But But I thank God for you being in my life. I'll continue to pray for you, man, and I hope you do the same thing for me.
Of course.
Pleasure having you on the podcast, and hopefully everything you had to say will have a good impact on someone out there. So thanks, and God bless.
Thanks for this, Paul.
Thank you for tuning into this podcast. I hope that you'll like, subscribe, and share this information along with people who may be interested in it. God bless.